My wife secretly married her boss and forged my signature to steal $250, $0 from our joint account, then filed for divorce claiming I abandoned her. Please help. I don't know how to prove her betrayal or fight for my share. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where I'd feel so betrayed and helpless, but here I am. It all started with a gut feeling, a nagging voice in my head that something just wasn't right. My wife, Lisa, had always been a bit bitchy and manipulative, but I never suspected she'd go this far. The biggest shock came when I uncovered her secret marriage to her boss, Mark, and the fact that she'd forged my signature to steal $250,000 from our joint account. That's when everything changed. Lisa and I had been together for over 10 years. We met in college, got married right after, and for a while things seemed fine. She was always a little high maintenance, demanding, and quick to accuse me of not paying enough attention. But I loved her, and I thought we were solid enough to get through anything. I never thought she'd betray me like this, especially not by secretly marrying her boss, Mark, who was a smooth-talking, ambitious guy in his late 40s. It all started to unravel about 3 months ago. I noticed her spending more time at work, coming home late, and acting secretive with her phone. She'd delete texts and hide her notifications. At first, I just thought she was working late or maybe having an affair, but I brushed it off. I didn't want to believe it. Then one day, I saw her phone lying on the coffee table, unlocked, with messages from Mark that were way too intimate. They weren't just flirtatious. They were downright sexual. That was my first real clue. But what really broke me was finding out she'd forged my signature on some documents. I work in finance, so I understand signatures and documents pretty well. I looked at the bank statements and noticed a huge withdrawal 250, missing from our joint account. I called the bank, and they confirmed the withdrawal was authorized with my forged signature. That was when I knew she'd been planning something for a while. I confronted her that night. I asked her about the messages, about where the money was, and her face twisted into that bitchy smirk she always wears when she's lying. She said I was overthinking, that I was paranoid, and that Mark was just a friend. She claimed the money was a loan from her boss, that she needed it for some business opportunity, and that I was just jealous. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying through her teeth, just like she always did when caught in a lie. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt numb, then furious. How could she do this? Marry someone else behind my back, steal from us, and then lie to my face. I felt so stupid for trusting her all these years. The worst part was realizing she had been playing me, pretending to love me while secretly planning her escape with Mark and all my savings. I had given her everything, my love, my money, my life, and she'd thrown it all away. For some smooth-talking asshole, that night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying everything I just learned. I sat alone in the dark, trying to process what I'd discovered. It was like my entire world was collapsing. I kept thinking about the life we built, the plans for the future, and how she'd shattered it all with her lies. I felt betrayed, angry, and heartbroken all at once. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. All I knew was that I couldn't let her get away with this, not without a fight. The next few days were a blur of anger, confusion, and a strange sense of clarity. I started digging deeper into her phone, her emails, anything I could get my hands on. I needed concrete proof, something I could use to confront her properly, something to show her that I wasn't just some naive fool who got played. The more I looked, the more I uncovered. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Secret meetings with Mark, fake receipts, even fake signatures on legal documents. It was all there. One thing that really stung was discovering that she'd opened a new bank account under her boss's name, using the forged signature I didn't even realize she'd been practicing. She transferred the money into that account, money she claimed was for some vague business investment. She told everyone she was starting her own boutique, but I knew better. It was all a lie. She was planning her escape, and I was just the fool she was leaving behind. I remember sitting in my office chair, just staring at the screen where the bank statement showed the withdrawal. The amount was staggering, more than I'd ever seen in our account. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all these signs? How did I not see the warning flags? I'd always been cautious with money, always checked the accounts, but this time she'd been so clever. She'd hidden her tracks so well. The forged signature, the fake documents, the secret meetings. It was like she had planned her departure for months. It made me feel so blind. The day I decided to confront her again, I knew I had to be prepared. I wanted her to admit everything, but I also wanted her to understand that I had proof. I set up my phone to record the conversation just in case. When she came home that evening, I was already sitting on the couch, calm but firm. She looked stressed, fidgeting with her purse, trying to act innocent. I didn't give her the chance to deny anything. I laid out all the evidence I had gathered, the bank statements, the forged signatures, the emails. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You've been spying on me," she snapped, trying to brush it off. "You're crazy. All this is just your paranoia." I shook my head, holding up the printed documents. "No, Lisa, I've got everything right here. The bank confirmed the withdrawal. The signatures don't match mine. You've been lying this whole time. You married Mark behind my back, forged my signature, stole our money, and now you're trying to pretend like I don't know anything." Her eyes narrowed and she threw her head back with a bitter laugh. "You think I care about your stupid money? That's nothing. I'm done with this life. Mark is the one who really cares about me, not you. You're just a boring, useless husband who never paid attention." That hit me hard. It was like a slap across the face. Her words, her attitude. She'd been so bitchy and dismissive throughout the whole thing. I could see the contempt in her eyes, the way she dismissed everything I said. It was clear she'd been planning her escape, and I was just the obstacle she wanted to get rid of. I felt a mixture of rage and sadness. Rage because she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible, and sadness because I realized I'd loved someone who was capable of doing all this behind my back. I'd always believed in the vows we took, but she'd broken them all. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and demand the truth, but I held back. I knew I had to stay calm, to think clearly. I told her she needed to leave, that I wanted her out of the house and out of my life. She looked at me with a wicked smile, saying she was finally free, that she'd never loved me anyway. That night I stayed awake, replaying everything in my mind. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but also determined. I knew I had to fight for what was mine, for my money and for my dignity. The next step was to get legal advice, figure out how to prove her deception, and protect myself from further damage. I couldn't let her walk away with everything she took, especially not without consequences. It was clear I was in over my head, but I wasn't going to let her win without a fight. I'd been, but I was still standing, barely. And I knew I wouldn't go down without a fight. After that confrontation, I realized I couldn't just sit around and hope things would somehow work out. No, I had to act fast. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer, someone who specialized in financial fraud and divorce cases. I wanted to know my options, how to protect what was left of our assets, and how to build a case against her. The lawyer listened carefully, took notes, and told me that I had a strong case, especially with the forged documents and bank statements as proof. But the problem was, Lisa was clever. She'd covered her tracks well enough that I needed more concrete evidence if I wanted to stop her from walking away with everything. In the meantime, I started digging into her activities more. I hired a private investigator just to keep tabs on her movements. I needed to see if she was still in contact with Mark, if she was planning to leave town, or if she was trying to hide any other assets. The investigator confirmed what I suspected. Lisa was meeting Mark regularly, often late at night, sometimes at hotels, sometimes at her boss's house. She was still involved with him, actively planning her escape. It was heartbreaking, but also a relief to finally have proof. While all this was happening, Lisa's attitude became even more bitchy and dismissive. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of being jealous and paranoid, and try to turn the tables on me. She'd lie about everything, saying she never married Mark, that she never took a cent from the account, that I was just imagining things. She'd even had the nerve to say I was the one cheating, that I was the one who'd been distant, that I'd abandoned her emotionally. It was all lies. I knew the truth now, and I had the evidence to back it up. One day, I found out she was trying to open a new bank account under a different name, probably to hide some of the stolen money. That was the final straw. I went straight to the bank with the evidence I had and filed a formal report. They froze her accounts and flagged her activity. I also contacted the police about the forged signatures and the theft. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to let her get away with this without facing some consequences. That's when I started contemplating my next move. I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just storm into court and demand everything back. She'd probably try to drag it out, lie her way through it, and maybe even try to claim I'd been abusive or something equally ridiculous to divert attention. So, I decided to prepare a detailed timeline, gather all the evidence, and organize everything legally. I also started documenting her lies, her meetings with Mark, and her attempts to hide assets. It was a lot of work, but I knew it was necessary. Meanwhile, I couldn't help feeling a deep sense of betrayal. All those years of trust, of building a life together, gone. I felt so stupid for not noticing the signs. Earlier, for not seeing how manipulative she'd become. She'd always been good at pretending to care, but behind that facade was a calculating, selfish woman who was willing to destroy everything for her own gain. It hurt to think about how she'd lied about loving me, how she'd used me to get what she wanted. The emotional toll was heavy. I'd go from furious to devastated in a matter of minutes. I'd cry alone, feeling the weight of the betrayal crushing me. I'd think about the kids, if we had any, or what kind of future I could still salvage. I knew I had to stay strong, for myself and for whatever was left of my dignity. I told myself I wouldn't let her win, that I'd fight to get my share of the money and to make her pay for what she'd done. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it yet, but I was determined not to let her walk out of this without consequences. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: she'd regret what she'd done. The legal process moved faster than I expected once I had all my evidence organized. My lawyer filed for a temporary injunction to freeze any further withdrawals from our joint accounts and to prevent Lisa from selling or transferring any assets. I also started gathering proof to contest her claims in the divorce, mainly the forged signatures, the stolen money, and her secret marriage to Mark. It was clear she was trying to claim I abandoned her, but I had proof that she'd been orchestrating her escape for months, secretly marrying Mark, forging my signature, and stealing our money. The day I went to see her lawyer, I realized how much this whole thing was draining me emotionally. Sitting across from a legal professional, explaining everything, I felt like I was in a nightmare. The lawyer told me I had a solid case, but warned me that Lisa was probably trying to spin her own story to minimize her guilt. She'd probably claim I was an absent husband, that I neglected her, or even that I was violent, anything to divert attention from her own betrayal. That's when I decided I needed to prepare myself for the worst. I had to stay calm, be factual, and let the evidence speak for itself. Meanwhile, Lisa was acting even more bitchy and dismissive. She'd throw tantrums whenever I tried to discuss the situation rationally. She'd call me paranoid and accuse me of inventing stories. She'd also try to manipulate our friends and family, telling them I was the one who'd been unfaithful or emotionally abusive. I overheard her telling her sister that I'd abandoned her emotionally and that she was just trying to find her happiness. It was classic her, lying, twisting facts, and throwing blame. But I knew better. I had the proof of her secret meetings, her marriage to Mark, and her theft. One morning, I caught her trying to withdraw more money from a different bank branch. I was already suspicious, so I followed her. I saw her meet with Mark at a fancy coffee shop, laughing and holding hands. That was the moment I decided I had to act quickly. I went straight to the bank, showed them the evidence, and had her accounts flagged. The bank froze everything, and I filed a police report about the forged signatures and theft. I didn't want her to get away with any more of my money. At this point, I was starting to feel overwhelmed, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to stay focused. I reached out to a forensic accountant, someone who could trace the stolen money and find out exactly where it had gone. I wanted to see if I could get some of it back, or at least understand how she'd managed to clean it out so thoroughly. The accountant confirmed that she'd moved some of the funds into offshore accounts, and I was advised to go after those assets through legal channels. Throughout all this chaos, I kept asking myself how she could do this to us. I kept replaying our years together, trying to find where I went wrong. Maybe I was blind, maybe I should seen the signs earlier, but it didn't change the fact that I'd been betrayed so thoroughly. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, and honestly, a lot of confusion. I'd always thought I was a good husband, that I provided and cared. Turns out she'd been planning her escape, marrying Mark and stealing from us right under my nose. I also realized I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I stopped answering her calls and texts, knowing she'd try to spin her story. Instead, I focused on gathering evidence and setting the stage for a legal fight. Deep down, I knew this was going to get messy, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to get justice. I had to protect what was mine, and I refused to let her walk away with everything she'd stolen. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and exhausted, but I also knew I had to keep going. I'd been, but I wasn't beaten. Not yet. The court date finally came, and I was ready. All my evidence was organized, my lawyer had everything prepared, and I had the truth on my side. Still, walking into that courtroom felt like stepping into a war zone. Lisa looked smug, sitting there with her lawyer trying to act innocent, like she hadn't just married her boss behind my back and stolen $250,000. I could see the contempt in her eyes, like she thought she had already won. But I knew better. The judge listened carefully as my lawyer laid out the case. We presented the forged signatures, the bank statements, the emails, the private investigators' reports, everything that proved Lisa's deception. Then describing how I discovered the evidence, how her lies unraveled, and how I'd been by her betrayal. I saw her squirm in her seat when I mentioned the marriage to Mark, how she'd forged my signature to steal our savings, and how she'd been planning her escape for months. I could tell the judge was taking it all in. Lisa's lawyer tried to spin her story, claiming I was neglectful, that I'd abandoned her emotionally, and that she was just trying to find her happiness. But I had more than enough proof to counter those claims. I showed the judge the fake signatures, the bank records, the emails, everything that proved she'd been lying from the start. When I finished, the judge looked at Lisa and said she'd review the evidence carefully. The verdict came a few days later. The judge ordered Lisa to return the stolen money, froze her accounts, and awarded me full custody of any joint assets remaining. She was also served with a restraining order, preventing her from contacting me or the kids, if we had any. The court didn't buy her lies about abandonment or neglect. They saw through her manipulative tactics. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders, but at the same time I was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained from the chaos. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Lisa moved out of the house, furious and bitter. She tried to appeal the decision, claiming I'd been abusive and that her actions were justified because I'd neglected her. But the evidence was clear. I filed for divorce, and the legal battle continued for a while. I had to fight hard to keep what was mine and to ensure she didn't walk away with more than she deserved. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and dignity. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild. I cut ties with Lisa completely, blocking her from my life. I focused on work, on my health, and on the small things that kept me sane. The betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to move forward. I also sought counseling to process everything: her lies, her betrayal, the loss of what I thought was a life built on trust. It helped me see that I wasn't at fault, that I deserved better, and that I could survive. Looking back, I realized just how much I learned from all this. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I fought for my rights, for my dignity, and for my future. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through something similar, it's to gather proof, stay calm, and fight for what's right. Don't let anyone manipulate or lie their way out of accountability. Because at the end of the day, justice isn't just about money. It's about standing up for yourself and not letting betrayal define you. Now that everything is settled, I spend a lot of time reflecting on what happened. It's still hard to believe I was so blind for so long, trusting someone who was capable of such deception. But I also realized that I was lucky. Lucky to have uncovered the truth before she managed to do even more damage. The money she stole, the marriage she hid from me, her manipulations, they all showed me how ruthless she could be when she thought she could get away with it. What sticks with me the most is how much I underestimated her. I thought I knew her, thought she was just a demanding wife, but she was something completely different, someone willing to lie, cheat, and betray everything we built. I was naive to believe her lies about loving me, about wanting a future together. Her actions prove she only cared about herself and her new life with Mark. This whole ordeal has changed how I see trust in relationships. I've learned that sometimes people are not who they pretend to be. They're good at hiding their true selves until it's too late. I've also learned that no matter how much you love someone, if they're capable of betrayal like this, it's better to cut ties and move on. Holding on to anger or hope won't bring her back or fix what's broken. The only thing I can do now is focus on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. The financial hit was tough, but it's also a wake-up call. I've become more cautious, more aware of the importance of protecting myself legally and financially. I'll never take trust for granted again, and I'll always keep a close eye on my assets. Most importantly, I've learned to value myself more. I don't need someone who manipulates and lies to feel complete. I'm capable of standing on my own, and I will. Looking back, I realize that betrayal teaches you a lot about resilience. It's painful, but it also pushes you to grow stronger. I'm not the same person I was before, and that's okay. I'm better now, more cautious, more aware, and more determined to find happiness on my own terms. No one deserves to be like I was, but if you find yourself in a similar situation, remember, gather your proof, stay calm, and fight for what's right. Justice may be slow, but it's worth it in the end. And ultimately, the betrayal has shown me what truly matters: integrity, honesty, and the strength to start over.